Good morning, everybody. The pitter patter you can hear is the wee dog. Joy. She's here for another day, apparently. So, yeah, you're very good. Now go and lie down. Go and lie down. Go on. Okay. I was alerted yesterday by two separate people to an article featuring both the people that alerted me to it, Marty, Tankleff and Kathleen Zellner. We'll have a look at that later. What I wanted to do first of all is have a look at another interesting article. Obviously the one with Marty Tankleff and Kathleen Zellner is an excellent article, hi Jazz, but this article I was alerted to by a fellow who's works for a DNA firm. At least he's an expert when it comes to DNA analysis. If I've got the let's have a look. Yes, sorry. I was alerted to this article by Eric Carita, a forensic DNA consultant and owner of ACE Forensic Consulting Services. So thank you to Carita for this one. Let's have a look at the article, see what it says. Oh, hi Mary, Jojo, Mary, hi there. Back up to the top for this one. So here we go. DNA cracked 1995 cold case murder of nurse, California police say. And this is an article by Tim Fitzsimmons. Police in Northern California say that DNA evidence cracked open a cold case murder from 1995 and led them to a suspect who was imprisoned in Texas. James Watkins, 42, was charged last week by the Reading Police Department for his alleged role in the 1995 murder of Christine Munro, the Reading Police Department wrote in a Facebook post. In simple terms, Watkins' DNA was under Christine Munro's fingernails at the time of her murder, the Reading Police Department wrote. And if we do the mathematics, if he's 42 now, back in 1995 he was 17. Down a bit, let me get a picture. There we go. Image of Christine Munro. Police said that Munro's death in 1995 devastated our community. The 37-year-old nurse and mother of four was found stabbed on the Sacramento River Trail June 24th, 1995. At that time, Reading Police Department investigators spent hundreds of hours collecting evidence and interviewing dozens upon dozens of witnesses and potential suspects, Reading Police Department wrote. But the case went cold. Reading Police Department said Detective Rusty Bishop began to crack open the case in 2019, shortly after he resubmitted fingernail scrapings from Munro to the Department of Justice's Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS. CODIS subsequently found a possible DNA match with a Texas state prisoner, James Watkins, who was serving a 14-year sentence for a robbery conviction. Authorities then travelled to Texas, where they secured a search warrant to obtain Watkins' DNA, which genetically matched the skin scrapings recovered from underneath the victim's fingernails. Watkins was flown back to Reading on November 13 and booked on charges of rape, kidnapping and murder, and remains in Shasta County Jail as he awaits trial. The Shasta County District Attorney's Office did not immediately return a request for comment, and it was unclear if Watkins had legal representation. The Reading Police Department wrote to Munro's family that they know it has been a long time since the loss of Christine. Thank you for your support during this investigation. We sincerely hope this brings you some measure of closure. I think that's it on that one. It's a very short article. Here's a slightly longer version of it, which puts a bit more detail on the issue. I say what strikes me is that, all these years later, 25 years later, and they're able to get a suspect, and they didn't jump to any conclusions. Anyway, California Department of Justice criminalists helped solve 1995 murder in Reading. On November the 13th, 2020, the Reading Police Department announced an arrest in the 1995 murder of Christine Munro, 37, who was attacked and killed while jogging on a trail along the Sacramento River in Reading on June 24th. Munro was a nurse and the mother of 4 children. At the time, Reading Police Department investigators spent hundreds of hours collecting evidence and interviewing dozens of witnesses and potential suspects. And what the other article didn't actually mention was a convicted rapist falsely confessed to the crime in 1997, but there was insufficient evidence to prove he was the killer. If this was in Wisconsin, a confession would have been enough, because there's certainly insufficient evidence on Brendan. But clearly in California, the bar is set higher. So there was insufficient evidence to prove he was the killer. Over the years, the case went cold. In late 2019, major crimes detective Rusty Bishop began reviewing the entire Munro cold case, including looking at physical evidence that could be analysed with modern DNA technology. In January of 2020, Detective Bishop resubmitted fingernail scrapings collected as evidence from Munro to the California Department of Justice for DNA analysis. In June, Detective Bishop received notification of a possible match through the Department of Justice Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. The evidence matched the DNA profile of James Watkins, 42, of Texas. Watkins was currently serving a 14-year sentence for robbery in a Texas state prison. The work of criminalists at the California Department of Justice never ceases to amaze us, said California Statewide Law Enforcement Association President Alan Barcelona. They are simply one of the most important elements in solving cold and current cases. Their contribution to criminal justice is invaluable. Not only have they identified a suspected killer from 23 years ago, I think he's got his maths wrong, 1995, they have provided closure for a family who lost their loved one and have had questions for many, many years. James Watkins, obviously when he was younger, James Watkins as he is now. After receiving the news from California DOJ criminalists, detectives immediately went to work reviewing Watkins' history and whereabouts before, during and after the murder of Christine Munro. They learnt that Watkins moved to Reading from Texas in early 1995 at the age of 17 to live with his aunt and uncle. During his 2 years in Reading, Watkins was contacted by Reading police 8 times. These contacts including an arrest for shoplifting, a warrant arrest and an unlawful camping citation. In the fall of 1997, he moved back to Texas. While living in Texas, he was arrested, charged and convicted of multiple crimes to include sexual assault, burglary, escape and bank robbery. He has spent a significant portion of his life in prison. In August of this year, several detectives flew to Texas to conduct follow-up on this case, including interviewing Watkins. With the assistance from the Texas Rangers, a search warrant was issued for Watkins' DNA. Upon their return, detectives transferred the Watkins DNA sample to the California Department of Justice Reading lab. Within a few weeks, the analysis confirmed the original codis hit was a match. It was confirmed it was Watkins' DNA that was under Christine Munro's fingernails at the time of her murder. Reading police obtained an arrest warrant for Watkins for the murder of Munro. Upon service of the warrant, with the assistance of Texas Rangers, the Texas Department of Corrections and the Texas State Troopers, Watkins was flown back to Reading on November 13, 2020, where he was booked into the Shasta County Jail on multiple charges, including rape, kidnapping and murder. Okie dokie. So, obviously, you know, we we have to give everybody the presumption of innocence that was denied Steve. But it struck me that here we have a 17-year-old that has viciously attacked Christine Munro. Could it be that an 18-year-old was responsible for the demise of Teresa Holbach? It didn't mention much in either of the articles about the type of person that this Watkins fellow is, James Watkins. But anyway, we've got a few more people here. Kelly, hi Cher, and on up. Hi everybody. So that's look, we're not here, posting on YouTube to try and undermine, the legal system in Wisconsin. We don't wake up every morning thinking how can we do our utmost to wreak havoc. The bad actors in this, they've brought it upon themselves. Yes, we've got Netflix to thank, hugely Netflix to thank, not just for Making a Murderer, but for all the other documentaries that they've done in highlighting these cases. But I think it's only fair when the system gets it right that we say well done, congratulations. Isn't it good to see a proper investigation produce proper evidence that will hopefully lead to a proper conviction and a proper closure in this Christine Munro case. Unfortunately, as we know, whilst a lot of the time, in fairness, the police get it right, and even the bad actors in Manitowoc, I'm sure that at times they have proven themselves to be useful to fellow citizens, just unfortunately not those at the Avery Salvage Yard. And far too often, obviously within our community, we read about these sort of things. So here is the article that was tweeted late last night by Kathleen Zellner, which Marty Tankleff had alerted me to earlier in the day, and both are mentioned in here. Wrongfully convicted in America, failed justice and lost years. And obviously there's Marty on the front there, Marty Tankleff, bottom right, shown speaking at a 2014 news conference in New York. Was wrongfully convicted of murdering his parents in 1988. He is now a lawyer who defends others who claim innocence. Across America, instead of starting his senior year in high school on September the 7th, 1988, 17-year-old Marty of Long Island sat in a police interrogation room answering a barrage of unfathomable questions that boiled down to this. Had he killed his wealthy parents as they slept? Police hammered the team for hours. He eventually was tried and convicted as an adult and spent more than 17 years in prison, a majority of the time in the Clinton County Correctional Facility in New York. But he didn't commit the crime. Then there's Michael Austin, who was at work on April 29th, 1974. That's when Roy Kellum, a security guard at a Baltimore grocery store, was killed during a robbery. But a witness swore under oath that Austin was the killer, and the 24-year-old Baltimore man was convicted of murder and sent to prison for life. He didn't do it either. Tankleff and Austin are two of 2,674 people who have been freed from prison and cleared of any wrongdoing since 1989. That equates to 23,950 years lost, according to the National Registry of Exonerations. In a criminal justice system centred on the principle that defendants are innocent until proven guilty, that's thousands of lives ruined, dreams crushed, and reputations tarnished. In some cases, the person who did commit the heinous crime went roaming free. It's easier to put an innocent person in prison than to exonerate an innocent person. Tankleff, now a lawyer who represents others who were wrongfully convicted, told Patch. Reasons vary for why such miscarriages of justice have happened. Some contend that the criminal justice system is racist or classist. Others cite official misconduct or corruption. Still others say it's more often a case of human error or faulty science. Whatever the case, organisations and individual lawyers such as Tankleff have taken up legal battles that require years to win. Kathleen Zellner has dedicated her law career to freeing people who claim innocence, gathering the evidence to prove it. She represents Stephen Avery, the Wisconsin man whose story was profiled as part of the Netflix documentary Making a Murderer, and others seeking freedom such as Melissa Kalusinski. Kalusinski was working at a daycare centre in a Chicago suburb on January the 14th, 2009, when 15-month-old Benjamin Kingan died in her care. The cause of the toddler's death has been ruled undetermined by the local coroner's office, but Kalusinski still sits in an Illinois prison, serving a 31-year sentence for murder. She told investigators 79 times she didn't do it. After several hours of intense pressure by detectives and without a lawyer, she confessed to throwing the boy on the ground really hard. It was a confession her lawyers from that point on have said was coerced. "We just want our daughter home," Paul Kalusinski, Melissa's father, told Patch. "It was just her birthday, and birthdays are hard. So are the holidays. Her favourite is Halloween because we would all decorate together." Readable x-rays that weren't publicly available until 3 years after Kalusinski's conviction suggest Benjamin did not suffer a skull fracture, a claim that was central to the prosecution at trial. The new evidence shows Benjamin suffered from a previous injury that led to his death, attorneys for Kulinski have said. But 6 years after the new evidence surfaced, there is still no new trial for Kulinski. As estimates show that thousands of people remain behind bars on wrongful convictions, it's not just bits and pieces of the criminal justice system that need changing, Tankleff said. It's an entire mindset. There's one aspect of litigation which we often fail to discuss. We focus on the back end of that litigation after someone is wrongfully convicted, but we really need to be focused on the front end, Tankleff said. Our goal should really be to prevent wrongful convictions, and to do that there needs to be a retraining in the prosecutor's office, in law enforcement, and even in the judiciary. When the police say someone has been arrested, we need to stop assuming that they are guilty. Austin's 1974 grocery store murder conviction was thrown out by Baltimore Circuit Judge John Cowell, who said it was plagued by errors, and the Baltimore State's attorney never retried him. He later received a full pardon from then Maryland Governor Robert Ehrlich. It was ineffective counsel, perjury, violation of due process, prosecutorial misconduct, and improper jury instruction that led to Austin's wrongful conviction, according to Centurion, an innocence organisation whose work since 1983 has led to the freedom for Austin and 62 others who were serving life or death sentences for crimes they did not commit. The lawyer I had was supposed to obtain the information that substantiated that I was at work while the crime was committed, Austin told Batch. Everything that was supposed to have happened in terms of providing a new trial based on the facts didn't happen. Since he was freed in 2007, Marty has earned his law degree and works in the Metcalf and Metcalf law offices in New York City. Work by students of Tankleff and Professor Mark Howard at Georgetown University, where Tankleff co-teaches a class on wrongful convictions and exonerations as an adjunct professor, led to the 2018 prison release of Valentino Dixon. Dixon spent 27 years in prison for a murder he did not commit. Tankleff said there would be far fewer wrongful convictions if more judges would use their gut. And I suppose that means, to just apply a bit of common sense to what they're seeing in front of them, and also to have the guts to actually stand up to the prosecutor and the police and say, what you've bought me is rubbish, take it away. I'm dismissing the case. I agree that it does start with that re-education, though, he said. We need to re-educate society. When a crime is committed in your backyard and police say someone was arrested, most people will be satisfied. Let's retrain our thinking so we don't always just accept it when law enforcement tells us something. Jarrett Adams was wrongfully convicted of sexual assault in Wisconsin and spent 7 years in prison until the verdict was overturned on appeal in 2007. He's now a lawyer assisting anywhere from 7 to 10 post-conviction clients at a time on a pro bono basis. We've been made to believe that if a suspect walks across the screen in handcuffs that they did something bad, Adams told Patch. That's not always the case. The mindset change Tankleff mentions doesn't happen without the entire branches of society, Adams said. The criminal justice system is classist and racist, and if it runs out of black people, it will start eating up all colours. Black people make up 47% of the wrongful convictions listed on the National Registry of Exonerations, even though they only account for 13% of the American population. The great majority of the more than 1,800 innocent defendants who were framed and convicted in crimes in 15 large-scale police scandals are black, according to research from the registry. I was poor, Adams said of his life at the time of his conviction. I couldn't afford an attorney. There was an all-white jury, a white accuser, and this notion that the black man is the boogeyman. The Wisconsin Innocence Project that worked to free Adams is one of 68 innocence organizations in the United States and Canada under the umbrella of the Innocence Network, which recently celebrated the 600th case exoneration since the organization's inception in 2005. Meredith Kennedy, executive director of the Innocence Network, told Patch, Tankleff is a perfect example of someone who went through literal hell, and instead of being bitter and letting it destroy him, it turned him around so that he could use his emotion to fuel him and make a huge difference. Kennedy points to academic work by Sam Ross, one of the founders of the National Registry of Exonerations, that says about 4% of people in prison are there for crimes they did not commit. 4% of the some 1.26 million American prisoners equates to more than 50,000 people who are potentially innocent in prison right now. Imagine a football stadium full of people, Kennedy said. More than 150 people spent at least 25 years in prison before they were exonerated. Richard Phillips, in prison in Michigan, get it right, from 1971 to 2017, is the person who has spent the longest amount of time in the American prison system on a wrongful conviction. By my reckoning, that's 46 years. Kennedy says while official misconduct happens every so often, it's the human system of criminal justice that's to blame for so many miscarriages of justice. In any kind of system involving human beings, you are going to have errors, Kennedy said. Not all the misconduct is necessarily intentional, and there are a number of wrongful convictions that didn't involve misconduct at all, like a mistaken eyewitness or faulty science. In Austin's case, it was a mistaken eyewitness. For Tankleff, it was a false confession. Both exonerees point to misconduct by police and in the prosecutor's office for why so many people are locked up for crimes they didn't commit. In Suffolk County, New York, where Tankleff was arrested and convicted, the system could take a good part of a generation to change, he said. The long history of corruption on Long Island has been well documented. It includes recent convictions of former Suffolk County District Attorney Thomas Spoter and former Suffolk Police Chief James Burke on allegations they led the cover-up of a police beating. Spoter was the district attorney and Burke the police chief during Tankleff's post-convictions appeals. It's that corruption, Tankleff said, that played a major role in his wrongful conviction. New leadership would need at least 8 to 10, 12 years to fully restore the long history of nepotism, corruption and scandals, Tankleff said. Austin, a black man, said racial inequalities were another factor leading to a zealous Baltimore police force zeroing in on him for a killing he wasn't even aware of. To understand the landscape in the black community in the 1970s, you had a whole host of police coming into our community and wreaking havoc for no reason, he said. Often they would come into the black community to eradicate murder cases and implement laws that facilitate that process. That's exactly what he said happened to him. When Austin showed up at the police station for questioning, he was told to empty his pocket and turn over his watch, glasses and wallet. They, the detectives, told me the sooner I would cooperate, the sooner I would get out of here, Austin said. I was very naive and foolish. I gave them what they asked for. Later, during his interrogation, Austin was told he had a calling card in his wallet for a person who was identified as another man involved in the killing. The detectives said initially that they had their doubts on whether I was involved. But the calling card was found, Austin remembers. I knew he was lying. I knew at that point the fix was in. When he was told he'd be charged with murder, Austin said he was stunned. It was like the world was snatched from under me, he said. When you have no control over the circumstances, you have a real sense of hopelessness. Still, Austin was confident heading into his trial because the witness's description of the killer was notably different from Austin's own appearance, but the witness still pointed him out in court, and that's all the jury needed. Austin was freed in 2001 at age 53 when a judge in the Baltimore City Circuit Court granted a new trial and said no reasonable juror would have convicted him knowing all the facts. A few of us guys went in and we were young and came out in our 50s and 60s. Austin said, it's wrong. Went a bit too quick then. Let's get it back up here. Tankleff's conviction was overturned in 2007 when a judge in New York appellate court vacated it. A few days later, the district attorney announced they would not retry Marty for the murders of his parents, and their deaths remain officially unsolved to this day. But as we saw in the other case, these things can get resolved. They can be corrected. The special prosecutor appointed in the case after several months of investigations then announced they would not retry Tankleff, but not all who are wrongfully convicted are free. I'll try and be a bit more careful here. Zellner, whose work has led to more exonerations than any other private attorney in the United States, hopes to add Kalusinski to the list. The Kalusinski case has gone through the local appellate process and is now in the federal court system, where a writ of habeas corpus, an act demanding a public official show a valid reason for that person's detention, has been filed. Her long wait for freedom is indicative of the system that moves far too slowly for the innocent. My appeal process took 7 years by itself, Adams said. You can be found guilty in the blink of an eye, have your life taken away from you like that, and then there's no sense of urgency in the same way to get you out. For Tankleff, his case had to be heard through local, state and federal courts before the conviction was vacated in the same courtroom where he was convicted 17 years earlier. It was frustrating, Tankleff said, especially when the first appeal went against me by a 3-2 vote. Kennedy said the process to free an innocent person takes a terribly long time. The average time it takes just to get back in court is 7 years, then another 3 years for post-conviction, she said. That's a decade lost, and it's heartbreaking. Steve Metcalf, an attorney who works in the same New York office with Tankleff, said it takes easily more than 10,000 legal hours and $1 million to prove a client's innocence through the current post-conviction process. That's, for me, quite an interesting number. Some of you might know that certain Chinese scientists have calculated that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to become a concert pianist. It's a process that has been completed for the likes of Tankleff, Austin and Adams. You know, the system eventually gets it right. While Tankleff and Adams are practicing law, Austin is a musician performing in Baltimore area jazz clubs. Excellent. For Kaluzinski, it is still a fight for freedom. We want her home, and that day will come, Paul Kaluzinski said. And if it is during the spring or summer, you can bet her and I are going out fishing when it does. Adams hopes for freedom for Kaluzinski and others who have shown evidence of no wrongdoing. It happened to me, and I've become able to contribute to society the way I am. So how do we get right? So how do we know right now we aren't blowing out the candle for someone else's contribution to the world, he said. Many times, lawsuits filed on behalf of those wrongfully imprisoned for several years will result in multi-million-dollar settlements. Maybe this is where the incentive will come from to implement change, when they realise just how much money is being wasted. Juan Rivera, a man imprisoned for 20 years after a wrongful conviction in the same Illinois county where Kaluzinski was convicted, received $20 million in 2015, $1 million for every year taken away from him. Tankleff received $10 million in 2018, and Austin was awarded $1.4 million in 2005. But there's no amount of money that can make right what happened to them, they have said. The money only puts you in a comfortable position financially. It does nothing for you emotionally, Austin said. It can give you security, make you worry less about getting a job, but it cannot provide comfort in a real way after what has happened psychologically. Okie dokie. I think that's more or less covered that. So I will leave the links to the articles in the description below, so that you can have a read of them at your pleasure. Okay, many thanks for tuning in. I will catch you all again soon. Bye for now.